is your Classic Metal Show right here on theclassicmetalshow.com. That was a little acoustic number called Until You Suffer Some, Fire and Ice. And, of course, Richie Kotzen. And on the line right now, the great guitarist, the great vocalist himself, Mr. Richie Kotzen. Richie, how are you, man?
I'm very good. How are you?
Excellent. Richie, I got to say, I think that this new release, the Essential Richie Kotzen, it's kind of a... I'd have to say it's kind of a lie, because really the Essential Richie Kotzen are the solo records in their entirety. Don't you agree?
Well, you know, it was an interesting thing we put together. It was kind of, I wasn't actually thinking about doing this, but the label that released the Winery Dogs record suggested doing this. And I guess there's a question that always gets asked to me by people that have heard of me for the first time, because I have so many records out. They're like, well, what record do I buy? And it's almost impossible for me to answer that, because, you know, they're like kids, you know, they all mean something to me. So now there is one package that someone can buy that wants to get into my music, and I think that was the real reason for doing it. Plus, there are 2 new songs on there as well. Walk With Me and War Paint. But, you know, I picked the songs that I thought over my career were the most significant and put the package together, and I think it serves its purpose.
Sure. The weird thing, at least for me, who is a fan and I think has all 18 or however many records it is that the way you seem to write, and maybe I'm dead wrong on this, but at least in my ears, the way you seem to write seems to be very fluid for each record, but then you go with different styles and different feels and different sounds from record to record. It's not like a song off the first record would fit on the 10th record for you. It really seems like you get into a vibe when you put a record together. Is that accurate?
Well, I think it comes to me. What I think it is, it comes down to time and growing over time. So, for example, you know, if you look at a record like I did in 1998, the What Is record, had a certain style, a certain sound to it. It was still me, you know, still writing songs with the similar chord progressions that I like to use and lyrical subject matter. So it's still a Richie Kotzen record, but it had a certain kind of sound because of what was going on around me at the time. And then if you just pull out, you know, a record like Slow, you know, that has a whole other kind of sound. But it has more to do with, you know, the growth over a period of time, because there's a lot of time between the first record and the last record, for example. So, you know, the new record I'm putting out next year, I've got a new solo record that'll be released called Cannibals. That's the working title right now, but I'm sure that's going to remain the same. And that record has its own sound as well. So, I mean, I just think it's a growth process, you know. There's no reason for me to make the same record twice. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes people say, well, why don't you make another fusion record? You know, I did in '95, this kind of instrumental thing. So, well, because I already did one. I'm not a fusion artist. I did that as a side, you know, step, kind of a thing to see if I could pull it off, and I did a cool record. But I don't see a need to repeat myself. I want to keep moving forward.
Sure. Now, are you surprised that your solo career has not had as big of success as the bands where you've been kind of the hired gun type to play in? You know, because and I'll put it this way, your vocals especially, people that hear it are always, and I'm sure you've heard this, everybody that hears it thinks it's Chris Cornell at first, and then you know, and then you would think, though, when you've had that much of a comparison to a big name guy like that over and over, that people would start gravitating to it on a mass scale. But it really seems like you've built your little core fan base and you've stuck there. Is that fair, or do you feel like people have just missed the boat?
Well, it's kind of a much more complex answer to what you're asking. The question is kind of covering a lot of variables, but to pin it down, one of the main variables of the question, I think, is inside your question of like why I'm not more known per se as a solo artist. I've been in so many positions to get to that point, and unfortunately, they didn't always work out for me. Never really had anything to do with my musical ability or what I do, but always had things to do with record companies and executives and perceptions. For example, when I was 19 was when I actually released my first record. Immediately after that, I started writing the second record, which I was singing on. And this is back in 1990. And that contract got bought by there was an indie label I was on called Shrapnel. Mm-hmm. And I got bought up by Interscope. And Interscope moved me to L.A. in 1990. And I started writing for a year. I wrote with all kinds of people. And by the end of the year, I had a producer in line. It was Danny Korchmar, who had just worked with Don Henley. And he was going to produce my record. I was 20 or 21 years old. And I wanted to make a record that was way more of an R&B thing. Basically, I saw myself as like, Daryl Hall with an electric guitar.
Right.
And that's kind of always how I saw myself as a teenager. Unfortunately, my break came through the more metal guitar thing because that was a way for me to get out of a small town. And so I jumped on it and I took it. But once I was signed to Interscope, after a year of writing, we had everything set to do this record, a budget. And at the last minute, the A&R guy, who was a very powerful guy in the business, came in and said, "No, you're not making this record." I'm like, "What are you talking about? We picked the songs out and everything." And he said, "No, I signed you to be a hard rock artist, and you're not going to be a balladeer or a crooner. You're going to be a hard rock guy." And I literally flipped out, and I demanded to be dropped from my contract. And, I was very young, so I figured, well, screw this, I'll get another record deal.
Right.
That was my attitude. So they did drop me. They left me out. They let me go from the contract without any teeth sunken into me. And oddly enough, when I lost the contract, I didn't have any money. I left, because they were supporting me. Mm-hmm. So I had a couple of months that I could figure out my next move. And ironically enough, the guy that dropped me from the label told me that Poison was interested in me joining their band. Which obviously, initially I was like, you're out of your mind. There's no way. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And he said, look, I know you wanted to make this record with Danny Korchmar, and I know you want to do this R&B thing, but I think you're still finding your direction as an artist, and I think you should go join this band, do a tour, do a record, and then come back to me and see where you're at. So obviously I joined Poison, and I enjoyed my experience there. They gave me a lot of creative freedom and made a cool record.
Sure.
After the tour, I left the band. I did what he said. I came back, and he didn't re-sign me. I ended up signing with Geffen. Interscope didn't sign me because they had gone into a completely different direction with rap music.
Right.
And what I was into doing didn't fit. So anyway, long story short, I got signed to Geffen, and there was more nonsense at Geffen when it came time to my record and the direction and all that. So my whole career has really been me fighting with industry people, and these were all super powerful people like, John Colodner signed me to Geffen, Tom Whalley signed me to Interscope and ended up running Warner Brothers. I was totally at the top of the food chain at a very, very young age.
Right.
But I was at the top of how can I say, I wasn't at the top of the right food chain. I was in this kind of hard rock metal world, and I really had no affinity or passion for hard rock or metal. It wasn't in me. It's not what I wanted to do. So when people ask the question, why aren't you a household name? Well, I can go back and trace why, because I really stuck to my guns and insisted on doing what I wanted to do musically. And it just, if you can't convince those gatekeepers to let you through the gate, you don't get through.
Sure.
So that's really the long answer to that question, but the most accurate answer. And then after a while, if you get to a point where, with the internet the way it is, I can make records. I can put them online. I can put them on iTunes. I can distribute them through CD Baby, for example. Mm-hmm. And I have enough of a fan base where I don't have to do anything. People buy my records. I go tour.
Right.
And I live my life. And I'm happy with that. I don't really sit around and calculate and think, how can I get more? Because I feel like I kind of have enough. I'm satisfied, and anything else that happens through my efforts is simply a bonus.
Sure. Do you think, and this is only from a fan side, not anything to do with any of the label exec people, but do you think the fact that most people heard about you for the first time with Poison pigeonholed you to what their expectation is for you musically?
I think that it's absolutely 100% true with the gatekeeper type record company people, and I know that because when I finished my solo record for Geffen, I sat there in a meeting with the publicist who at the time was working with Counting Crows, and she said to me, the biggest problem we have is how do we market this record and not draw attention to the fact that you were in the band Poison, and this was in 1994. And my argument was, well, it's really not relevant because the people that are going to appeal to the record that I made won't even know I was in Poison unless you tell them, because no one in this particular world is paying attention to what Poison is doing. So it's not relevant until you make it relevant. It's the same thing that the news does in media. Something happens and suddenly they grab it and blow it up to the point where it becomes this huge issue where it really shouldn't be. So all that pigeonhole nonsense really starts with the record companies and the gatekeepers. Some kid somewhere that's a fan of music, if he hears a record and he likes a song, once he likes the song, he might research, well, who is this band? And then he might discover their lineage or their background. And if he likes the music, it's not going to matter. But unfortunately, especially in this country, people just have they're unable to really look at things for what they are, and they need to have a preconceived idea of something to put it in a box and then have the option to write it off and say, oh, well, yeah, well, whatever. I think they know it when they really don't know what they're talking about. So, but it really started not so much with people that buy records or the fans. It's not a fan issue. It was always more of a gatekeeper issue, the people at the labels, at the radio stations, and so on.
Sure. Do you think that part of it is the fact that people don't appreciate art like they used to now? And it is what it is. It's definitely art. It's definitely a creative music.
I think people like you and I and the people listening to your radio show right now understand and appreciate art, because that's what they're being affected by. And it doesn't matter what the genre is. If it's, there are metal bands that are very artistic, and there are very basic, blues rock bands that are still artistic. People like us get it. Where it becomes an issue, and has always been an issue, is the people that are running the business. And it's nothing you can fault them, because that's what they're doing. They're running it. For them, it's a business. For them, it's not about artistic value, because an artist can be an artist all day long. I can be an artist all day long and make my work and put it out and make it available, and that's the end of it. The minute I start wanting that to turn into commerce or being celebrated for it, I'm stepping into the world, I'm stepping outside the world of art and into the world of business. And so that is the world that these labels are in, the ones that still exist and still function, which is fine, because that's what they do. And it's shrinking, obviously. So that's partially because the art component has been removed, and people now can find artistic music that they actually like on their own and don't need the labels. And then that also ties into the second thing, that the technology is creating the situation where people like you and I can go and find other music. So, you're not held hostage to what a label says you have to listen to.
Definitely. Now, Richie, you've, in addition to your solo stuff, and in addition to Poison, and in addition to Mr. Big and everything else that you've been involved in, in the last couple of years, you've had big, I don't want to say commercial success, but you've had big success in the terms of people really, really digging this project that you're doing with Mike and Billy, the Winery Dogs. Very positive reviews almost across the board. Very positive concert reviews almost across the board. Are you surprised by the success of that band, or because? And the reason I'm asking if you're surprised is not because you would have gone into it thinking it's bad or anything, but because of the fact that it really is a little bit more artistic than the normal stuff that gets such high praise.
Well, I'm totally surprised, and I know that I think the other guys are surprised. To be completely honest, I didn't expect the Winery Dogs to be as active as it is. In other words, I initially did this thinking, hey man, this is a cool thing. And I got to be honest, I thought it was like a cool side project thing to do. Like I figured, well, I'll get together with these guys, write some songs, put out a record, do a couple of shows, maybe a month. I figured we'd do some key markets, obviously New York, L.A., Tokyo, Sao Paulo,
Mm-hmm.
a couple shows in Europe. I literally figured it'd be that kind of vibe, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And suddenly the record came out, and it charted in America on Billboard. I think we landed at 27, which for someone like me that's like so under the radar, you know, I'm like, wow, that's kind of crazy. And then it was like, there was another chart on iTunes. It was number 2 on some chart, and I remember the Rolling Stones were right in front of us. Now, I don't know what these charts mean, how relevant they are, but obviously they're tied to sales, so somebody ran out and bought the thing.
Right.
And so that was the first surprise. And then we just kept getting all these offers to play, and people responded so well to the band that I said, well, I guess I have to prioritize this band because it's really doing more than I expected. And that doesn't mean that I expected it to fail, but I mean, I know my history and the things that I've been told by the people in the industry, and I know Billy, you know, has been through everything he's been through. So I just wasn't expecting to have that kind of commercial reaction, you know. And so it was a positive thing. Now, obviously we're on a break, so you know we're gonna do my solo stuff for a minute here. I know Mike and Billy both have things they're doing, but our plan is to get together next year and start writing, and hopefully we'll have a record ready to be released in the middle of next year.
Sure.
Now, have something out in the summertime. You know, that'd be a perfect world.
Excellent. Well, Richie, you're kind of, and this is a strictly me outside looking in type of a thing, but you're outside of when you're promoting something, when you've got a project to push, you're pretty much a quiet guy publicly. You're not in the limelight. You're not on TMZ, and you're not getting arrested. You know, you just kind of do your thing and then you get out of the limelight. Billy is sort of the same kind of a guy. You know, Billy is definitely not. When Billy's got a project, that's when you hear Billy's name. Then after that, it's the occasional shows up at a fusion show or something, and that's about all you ever hear. Portnoy's not that guy. You know, he's always in the media. He's always on the internet. Generates a lot of negativity, for better or for worse, you know, online because he doesn't hold his tongue at all. You know, what I'm curious about is for you, is that a comfortable dynamic because you're so not that guy?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it certainly doesn't bother me. I mean, he says and does whatever he says and does. He's been that way, you know, long before I knew him, and I like Mike a lot.
Sure.
I, you know, become good friends with him, and so, you know, I get a lot of amusement out of his antics, to be honest with you. And to some degree, I think I'm a little on the evil side. I tend to, like, if he says something, you know, I tend to do things to kind of make it worse, to see how far I can wind it, you know.
Right.
But obviously, in the end, I let him know I'm kidding. But it was funny because I think I can tell this story. I don't think Mike's going to get upset with this. But when I first went out on the road, we were in Europe, and we had a crew. And two of the guys in the crew, the sound man and my guitar tech, had previously worked for Mike.
Okay.
I believe when they were all together in Dream Theater.
Okay.
And so we're on the bus, and I don't know what was said or what was talked about, but somehow the old band came up, and it was just the three of us. Mike was gone, and I said, guys, I got to ask you something. I said, forgive me. I said, but what the hell is Mike's involvement with this band Dream Theater? You guys keep bringing up Dream Theater. What did he like? Was he like did he produce one of their records, or I mean, what did he play on something? I mean, what's the point here? And they're looking at me like I'm a complete, you know, lunatic. Like, really? Like, right. You don't know? I said, I don't know what. He was in the band for 20 years. He was one of the founding members of the band. You didn't know that? I said, oh, no. I said, I had no idea. I thought maybe he produced a record or maybe did some A&R work. I didn't know he was actually in the band. So, like, the whole day, they're looking at me like, man, this guy just wrote and recorded an entire record, doing a world tour. He has no idea who he's in a band with, you know, meaning me.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the kind of, I'm kind of doing shit like that all day long, you know, whenever I have a chance to mess with him.
Right.
You know? So, I don't know. To answer your question, I get a kick out of it. I enjoy it. Like, the latest thing, I guess, was something about a kid that wore the wrong T-shirt.
Yeah.
But Mike is a loving guy. He's a sensitive guy. He's a very talented musician. He's a great person. So, when it comes to this Twitter stuff, I can see how, you say something that is the kind of thing that you might say to your friend, like if I say to you something about somebody,
yeah,
and it's like normal. And then, but if you tweet that and someone doesn't really know you or know the context of your conversation,
right,
it can be looked at in a different way. But I gotta look at Mike as like a guy from Long Island that's just talking to his friends, like the way he deals with the internet and all that. He's just kind of talking to his friends,
right.
And he assumes that people know, how serious or how not so serious, or that T-shirt thing to me was kind of more like a funny thing you'd say to your buddy, like, man, you believe this guy shows up and blah blah blah. It's like it's not really that heavy, is what I'm trying to say.
Right, sure.
But of course, the media gets a hold of it and it turns into a world affair. That's the bottom line.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. And don't get me wrong, I think Mike's great. And I love the fact that he says what's on his mind, just for the fact that so many guys come at guys like me with stock answer after stock answer. And what good is that? Just do one interview instead of 20 then.
Well, yeah, exactly right.
Nice. Well, Richie, you mentioned it earlier. You have a new solo record that's coming out at the beginning of 2015. Talk a little bit about that. What's that going to sound like?
Oh, it's going to be a total mess, man. Like totally out-of-tune guitars, no choruses. It's going to be horrible, but I'm excited about it.
Great.
It's you never hear someone talk about a record like that, by the way. Like, if someone makes a record, you never hear them say, man, check out my records. This shit really sucks.
Right.
You're really going to love ripping this apart, man. Well, listen to this section. I didn't even bother to tune the guitar when I played this part. I think that's going to be the approach for the next record.
There you go. Just, I had to do it.
Yeah. I want to cover all bases stylistically. It's a cool record. It's going to be interesting because there's some songs on here that are brand new, and then there's a couple that are like these kind of weird hybrids. Like I went back and found some songs like years ago, like as far as 10 years ago, that I never finished.
Okay.
But I had cool parts for, and then I went back and rewrote some of those. So there's some of that. I got a song on the record that is my favorite thing that I've done in a long time, and it's really out of character for me. But it's a song that is titled "You," and my daughter, who's now 17, but this must have been back when she was 14. She was playing this piece on the piano that she wrote,
right?
And every time she would sit down, she'd play this thing. And I said, "August, you got to write a song out of that. It's so cool." And it had all these, 3 sections or 4 sections, whatever. And so one day I said, let's just record it, at least so we don't, because you're going to forget it.
Right.
So I set up the mics real nice on the piano, and she recorded everything. And then years later, fast forward to now, I found the recording of the piano that we did.
Okay.
And I said, I got to do something with this. Now, she had 3 years to finish this song. I'm going to finish it. So I followed her melody and I wrote lyrics to it, and it's on my record that's coming out, and it just came out really cool. I'm so happy with it, and we got to do something together. So now this weekend we're going to make a music video for it with my friend.
Wow.
That did the Winery Dog video, and so that song is one I'm excited about. The opening track is called Cannibals, which is pretty cool. It's got a different kind of sound. Like you said earlier, like my records kind of seem to evolve. And I think this one hasn't yet another step, forward in exploring some uncharted territory for Richie Kotzen. So
sure,
I'm excited about it.
Excellent. Well, for now, people are going to have to just settle for the Essential Richie Kotzen. It's a 2-disc thing. First one is made up mostly of tunes that have been out before, with a couple of new tracks. Second one has a lot of cool acoustic stuff and demos and stuff, which are very cool. I have to say, the one that we opened with, the Poison tune, the rework of that, I'm just going to say, is better than the original of it, just because it has a totally different. I mean, it's recognizable, but it has a totally different vibe to it, man, which is very cool.
Yeah, that's why I did that acoustic nonsense, because what happens is, you hear these songs, and even my songs that weren't Poison songs, like What Is, or some of these other tunes that were still cut in a standard band production. You have these songs, but when you break them down to just guitar and voice, you're really hearing the song. You know, there's no production value other than, you know, how I'm strumming the guitar and voicing the chords. And so I kind of like that. That's why I did that on the second half of the record. I picked a couple of songs that I thought really could have been done justice by a simple breakdown of parts down to just voice and an instrument. So, you know, you got me playing piano there with The Road and Regret, or you've got, like you said, Until You Suffer Some, you know. So you get to hear these songs just for the song value and, you know, production aside. So
Sure.
that was my idea.
Very cool. Well, Richie, just one more quick one, and this is one I ask every virtuoso guy like yourself that I speak to, just more out of a curiosity. And I'll just tell you, I'm by day I'm a computer program guy, so I can't think of a time that I've ever gone 5 days without touching a computer. I'm curious, as a guitar guy, when is the last time you went 5 days without touching a guitar?
Oh, I thought you were going to say touching a computer. I was
No.
going to say I touch a computer every day. The guitar, well, 5 days.
5 days.
Might be a little extreme. I definitely will do, you know, a couple of days where I don't play because I get busy with other things. But, like, you know, I don't know. Since I've been home, I haven't really played. I picked up the guitar to change the strap. The strap broke on my last gig.
Okay.
So, but I wasn't really playing, you know. But, yeah, that happens. I mean, I don't know the last day, but, I mean, that does happen because, you know, I need a balance. I'm not one of these guys that can just sit and practice rudiments over and over again. It's pointless for me. Like, I need to get away from the thing, get some perspective, and then plus I like the creative process. I like writing stuff.
Right.
Whether I'm any good or not is not the question. It's just what I enjoy doing. So in order to do that, I have to get away from it and go do something else. I mean, I don't know, just go to a pub and, you know, talk to some strangers, or,
Right.
you know, sit on the bench next to a homeless guy and find out what's going on, or whatever the hell it is. But I need some kind of input in order to have some kind of perspective to push output, you know?
Right.
So
Sure.
my point is there are plenty of times where I don't, you know, look at the guitar and maybe, you know, a week goes by.
Wow.
You know,
I got
might pick it up, noodle on a chord, but, like, you know, I'm not sitting there really playing, you know what I mean?
Right. I got to tell you, I've been doing this since 1998. You're the first one I've ever asked that has it that didn't say never. You know, most of these guys never put them down. They they live with it.
Yeah. Well, you know, I lived with it my whole life. When I was a teenager, I'd fall asleep with the guitar in my hands.
Right.
But, you know, I kind of changed my, you know, a lot of guys, their focus is literally the instrument and what can I do next on the instrument, which is a beautiful thing. It's very cool. I mean, Billy's a lot like that. He focuses solely on the instrument and what he can, you know, okay, I got to master this technique. I got to master that technique. And so that is a cool thing because, you know, you're constantly building facility on the instrument. But I think when I started singing more seriously, like in my late teens, early 20s, and then I started taking writing more seriously, my scope of how I view music and how it fits into my life has changed from, as a teenager, being a rudiment study-oriented guy who wanted to be able to play every single lick that anyone could ever think of. Right. And then it kind of shifted to, okay, well, why am I learning the instrument? What is my real purpose here? And my purpose became to create music. And so in that process, you know, you can't focus on everything at once. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And my focus has moved on to, you know, lyrical concepts or groove or ideas, conceptual musical things in production or whatever. And it kind of moved away from, you know, how well can I nail this alternate picking line and then lead into a series of sweep arpeggios. It's like I kind of figured that out when I was, you know, 19, 20 years old. And I have that. I can use that when I need to, but my scope kind of changed. It's a different focus. So it's probably why, you know, when you ask me the question, if you put down the guitar, I say, yeah, I put it down a lot.
Right.
In order to do some of the other aspects of what it is that I do.
Sure, definitely. Well, for now, man, the name of the new record is The Essential Richie Kotzen. It's a collection of a lot of stuff that people haven't heard. And if you're not familiar with Richie's past, it's a big collection of stuff that you haven't heard. So Richie, has a tradition on the show, we always let the artist pick a closing track from the record. So what would you like us to wrap the interview up with, and maybe tell us a quick story about it?
Well, since it's a new song, I guess you could wrap it up with Walk With Me, if you don't mind.
Sure. And
that song features an electronic instrument called a theremin, and it's played by with both hands. One hand, the closer you get, changes the pitch,
right, and
then the other hand, closer, further away you move, changes the volume. So, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. If you see me on the video, you see I look kind of like a lunatic, like a mad scientist, but I'm actually playing that instrument that's making that kind of crazy sound that almost sounds like a violin. The reason I'm bringing it up is I recently ran into my sister in Philly at one of my winery dog shows, and she watched the video, and she's talking about, well, why are you moving your hands like that? Is that some kind of new dance? And I started laughing. I'm like, no, I'm not randomly moving my hands. I'm actually playing an instrument. So I realized that maybe a lot of people don't understand or know what a theremin is. And that instrument is featured in this song. And I don't know, it's one of my favorite songs I've written in a long time. I wrote it very easily in a hotel room on one of my tours somewhere in Europe. And that's it. It's called Walk With Me.
Well, let's check it out right now. It's brand new Richie Kotzen right here on your Classic Metal Show.